Lovely. Yes. So welcome everyone. Today we're covering getting the most from your email marketing data without breaking the rules. And evidently you may have gathered the first half is me and the second half is Mark. So we are going to keep things quite basic and quite simple. Don't want you to feel intimidated or overwhelmed by either of these. I know there are certain aspects of marketing that sometimes seem like, oh, you know, that's something that's not for me, and it's not the right kind of thing for my business. But you're already here, so you already showed an interest in working on email marketing within your business. So I hope that you very much find this useful, and certainly the support that Mark gives in the second half of the presentation. For me, myself, as a marketer even, it's essential to have an understanding of these things. So you can just have that confidence that whatever you're doing, you know you're doing it appropriately and compliantly. So, email has an ability many channels don't, creating valuable personal touches at scale. And for me and us in our business, that's why I think email marketing is such a powerful tool, because it gives you the opportunity to speak to a very large group of people at once while still making it feel personal. And if that's something that's really important to your business, which I know, knowing a lot of your businesses it is, it's about having that personal engagement and that personal experience. You don't have to be afraid that you're going to lose that with email marketing. And there's a variety of ways we can do this, and I'll explain as we go through whether it's the content of your email or the way it's written or how it's delivered. You know, you can still feel like you are reaching out specifically to those individuals and they feel valued, and that's the big difference. So a bit about me. Even those who know me probably very well don't know that my degree has nothing to do with marketing. My background is philosophy and politics, with marketing at the University of Exeter. And I suppose most people say, well, how does that get you into marketing in the first place? And for me, it's the relationship between understanding people and how they think about concepts, such as your products and services, and how that is understood and articulated in a clear way. And that's essentially what you're doing in marketing. So that's the link there. So my background is predominantly in-house. I worked through several technology and marketing businesses before I started Optima 3 years ago. And along the way during my career, I studied for a professional diploma with the CIM, Chartered Institute of Marketing, and became a full member of the Chartered Institute of Marketing in 2013 and have been since. So like I said, Optima started in 2017, recruited my first member of staff in January 2019. That's Tesh, who some of you may know. And the business is still going from strength to strength. And I'm really actually excited about some new things that are coming down the line, which is not the time or the place, but that is all looking very positive. And I think one thing that differentiates both Optima and Guru, the newest business that I've launched this year, is it's very much a person-centric approach. And this is why I'm advocating email marketing and why Mark and I are doing this session. Through a combination of my university studies, understanding product management, employee motivation, so tools that some of you, Marion, for example, might be familiar with, motivational maps. A lot of that is about understanding human behavior and how we engage and interact with the world. And if you have that in mind when you're creating any kind of content, including email marketing, you're going to be better placed to be able to develop marketing content that resonates with people. You want to understand what's important to them and try and put yourself in their shoes. And that's equally true with something that seems as generic as email marketing as it is with sending someone a LinkedIn message or networking. You know, it's all about being personal and tailoring what you're doing to your audience. So let's start with the basics. Your subscriber. So a subscriber in the world of email marketing is an email address. You could say that it's an individual, but it isn't always that's the case. It may well be an info at or a hello at, sales at. So in the world of email marketing, an identity is your email address. And the amount of information you attach to that email address will depend on how much you want to personalize your content. So I would always recommend having a first name and a last name in your email marketing database as well. So that gives you the opportunity to personalize your titles. So, hi, Fiona. You know, if you have that complete data, and I say complete because there's nothing worse than hi blank comma, that gives you a lot more flexibility to create those personalizations. And again, that's true with business aims as well. I received an email from somebody offering branded products the other day, and they said, hey, wouldn't it be brilliant to have an Optima marketing mug? And if you have the company name and you have all that complete information, you can use it within the content to create that personalized message. So the template. A template in most email marketing platforms, pretty much all of them, is the body of the email that you'll send. And pretty much all emails are created from templates, unless it's something that you do yourself. I would always recommend to start with a template. So this is the body of the email. It doesn't include things like the title or anything like that. It's literally the bit that people are going to view in their viewfinder. A campaign. So different language for different marketing stages, but in the context of email marketing, a campaign is an email sent out en masse to a list. That's one campaign. Automation, I'll only touch on this very briefly, but it is worth being aware of. So automations are preset actions that are triggered automatically. So the automation may well be started when someone joins a mailing list. You may be able to, you may set up an email that is sent automatically when someone joins your mailing list. Or the trigger could be an amount of time. So 7 days after they receive the last email, another email will be sent. That is also a trigger. So it can be time-based, it can be event-based. And the fifth element that I would say you would need to understand is sign-up forms. And this is a brilliant method of obtaining new subscribers in an organic way. And I say organic as in it grows itself. So it's not the same as actively going out and gathering email addresses. Sign-up forms are a way of allowing other people to contribute and build your database for you. So I'll come back to sign-up forms later as well. So there are 4 core stages to getting started. Choosing your platform, establishing your goals, creating your plan, and building your list. And I will look at each of these 4 elements now. Again, as I always say, this doesn't have to be overwhelming. And what I've provided here is a snapshot of how to get started. And if you feel like you need more support digging into any of these areas, of course, I would be available to help with that. So some of these you may have heard of, some of them may be completely new to you. The most common one that most people will have heard of is MailChimp. It's the biggest in the world. It's an American company. It's generally the one that people gravitate to because it's what they know. Other ones are Campaign Monitor, Constant Contact. There's huge options out there, as there are with any marketing software. But the one I use myself, as do quite a few people that I work alongside, is MPZ Mail. So it's that bottom one on the list. The reason that I personally recommend this platform, A, it's based in the UK. So Mark, again, we'll touch on data location later, I expect. But for the features you can get with MPZ Mail, you would have to pay for them in MailChimp. So there are different ways of price, there are different price tiers depending on the different products. MailChimp, you have to pay depending on how many emails you send a month versus how many subscribers you have. So 2 different variables there. You could send one person 10 emails a month, or 10 people 10 emails, and that counts differently. And I'm already getting confused explaining it. But NPZ Mail is an incredibly simple structure where you get all the functionality for free, and you're only paying up to on volumes. And I haven't yet hit volume where I have to pay. So for that reason, and also for the flexibility of the platform and the ease of use, NPZ Mail is the one I recommend. So next step, establish your goals. So I've broken this down into 2 categories, new customers and existing customers. So for new customers, you may decide that you want your email to achieve customer acquisition, and that it will generally be the first email that they'll have from you. So someone who doesn't know you already, and you want to create a customer from that contact. Brand recognition is another. It's more subtle. You're not jumping straight in there and saying, join me, buy this. It's about sharing and engaging with people first. Market development. So by market development, I mean telling new people or existing customers, even to be fair, about something that they're not currently familiar with. And this will be particularly applicable if you are changing your business slightly and you're doing a different offering than maybe you've done before, and you want to explain and inform. So these goals will have different, the way you'll approach these goals will be different depending on what you're going to get out of them. It's all different stages in the customer relationship, so it needs a different message. Lead generation and promotion. So promotion applies whether it's a new or existing customer. It's informing them about something if you've got an offer, if you want to make them aware of a sale that you're having at the moment, and to close sales. So you may have, I don't know if anyone's received an email when they have been moving around a website, they've put a few things in their basket and then they've navigated away. But then you get an email 10 minutes later saying, oh, you've left things in your basket, you want to finish your order. So that is another way that email marketing can be used if you have it connected with your e-commerce. Existing customers. So engagement. So your call to action, if your goal is engagement, may be take part in a survey or visit the website to download something. It's doing something that progresses the relationship between the two of you. Customer service. So whether that just be a thank you for buying from us, a follow-up, how did you feel about your experience, which also leads to relationship marketing. So relationship marketing covers anything where you are utilizing a relationship to promote your business. So that may be partnerships. So Mark has used relationship marketing to promote this webinar. He was emailing you guys and his customers, but it mentioned my brand. So that's partnership marketing. And then you have a sort of referral schemes, forward this onto a friend, all of that, anything that relates to people and how they can support your business indirectly comes under relationship marketing. Customer satisfaction. So like I said, surveys, it's kind of quite closely related to customer service. Customer retention as well. So encouraging repeat purchases. So if you are really organized with your data in your CRM and you know people have been buying a particular product, you can email them and say, hey, we had a wedding photo shoot last year. Do you want to do a first anniversary picture, for example? I'm saying that because I can see Fiona on my screen. It's products that they're already familiar with to a certain extent, but those that are going to build on the relationship and build on what you've already done with them. That's customer retention. Promotion, again, if there's something specific that you wanted to offer. Yeah. So creating your plan. I've split this into 2 sections. I almost did the what, where, who, when, why, but I think we'd all get a bit lost in our words. So we have one section on method and the second is content. So the method, when, so that's your time and date and your frequency. So for example, sending emails on a Friday afternoon, if it is a business customer, is probably not the best idea because that's not the frame of mind to receive that email at that time of day. And equally not late at night. Weekends, for example, my recommendation, particularly if it's B2B, is early to mid-morning or lunchtime. So like with anything, customer behavior mimics your behavior. You know, we often think, oh, what's the science, or how am I going to do this? But a lot of the time we can just, to a certain extent, when we're putting ourselves in our customer's shoes, when am I most likely to read an email? And you can't really go that far wrong if you consider yourself to be a potential customer of your own product or service. You know, when would I be most receptive to opening an email and reading it and engaging with it? When will I have time? Probably not on a Monday morning, and I probably couldn't care less on a Friday afternoon. So again, this is why I say understanding people and behavior is so important, because it will influence these decisions. How? So will you be sending emails ad hoc? That may be the case if it is a product launch, because you won't have a product launch every 5th day of the month, unlikely. They may be scheduled. So if you have an email newsletter, you may choose to schedule this on a Tuesday morning, the first Tuesday morning of the month. If you're doing a regular newsletter, I probably wouldn't recommend doing any more than 2 a month, unless your product is very digitally focused and your service is online. People are more likely to engage with an online service and the online marketing. But generally for a newsletter, I'd say once a month is fine. Or automated, as I've already mentioned. So if your email is focused on a series of deliverables, so they've signed up to a 7-step plan and you want them to receive an email for 7 weeks, that would be something that you would queue up as an automation rather than a scheduled post. And then where, so both geographically and digitally. So our language is an issue. If you're not likely to want to translate or not able to translate your emails, is it worth focusing more on the visuals and using fewer words? Is time zone important? If you are potentially sending emails to Americans, 8 o'clock in the morning for us might be 3 o'clock or even earlier, depending on where they are. So that may factor into the time that you send your emails. And when I say digitally, I mean, are they viewing it on their mobile or desktop? And once you've sent your first email, you'll get more of a feel for this because you can see it in your analytics. But it is quite surprising how many people now view their emails on their mobile phone first. So if you're finding that the vast majority of your audience is viewing them that way, you may consider sticking to a 1-column layout as opposed to 2, making your email simpler, having fewer links, having less detailed images, because the smaller they get, the harder they'll be to see. So that will have an influence as well over how you create your email and the content you'll have in it. And I would say, regardless of what you do, optimizing for mobile is a must now. And you can always test your emails. And when you do test, I look at them on every device I have. iPad, phone, big screen, small screen, laptop, desktop, whatever you've got, because it will always present slightly differently. And you want to try and get a feel for how your audience is viewing the email to make sure that you can iron out any kinks. So the content. Now I could probably sit here all day and talk about how you could fulfill an email. If it's a newsletter, I recommend between 2 to 4 topics, probably no more, because people don't engage with that much and then it becomes too long. but 2 to 4 max, unless it's a dedicated announcement, in which case you really just want to focus on the one thing that you're trying to put across. Anything else is going to detract from that. So the first area of content would be about your business. So latest news and information, reviews or testimonials. If you've had a great one from a customer, you can put that in an email newsletter. Business achievements, milestones, or anniversaries. If your business is so old, you're on your 100th hour of coaching, whatever it may be that suits your business. A behind the scenes look. So if you've just made some changes in your office that make it a particularly branded or welcoming space, that's something that you can share with your potential customers. And then loyalty schemes and refer a friend. So I know a lot of these things cover content that you can use anywhere. You could put this kind of content on social media, and I would recommend doing both with whatever you're doing. But a lot of the time people get very stuck on what to include in email newsletters. And so hopefully there's 5 bullets right here, and there's a couple more coming up in the other columns that will inspire. So it's by all means not an exhaustive list, but hopefully it will get the creative juices flowing. So second, we have products or services. So if there's something new, you should always tell your current customers about it. And this alone is a reason to do email marketing. Product services of the month, if you want to focus on something particular that's seasonal. Again, I'm sorry for picking on you, Fiona, but you're one of 3 people on the screen, and me and Mark are the others. If you have an autumnal offer at the moment, that would fall into this category. She's nodding because I know she does. That's your product service of the month for October. There we go. Case studies of a particular product or service. This is probably a bit more extended and more specific than a review. And then deals, sales, or coupons, again, and then updates on products or services. So if you've changed something or you've adapted, again, you don't want your current customers to be the last to know. It's all very exciting. If you've got something new and exciting, you want to splash that on social media, and then 3 months later, someone will say, oh, I didn't know you did that, when you're following up with your next review. So keeping everyone informed of the latest changes in your business this is exactly what email marketing is for. And then the fun stuff. So you can offer tips and advice. If there's something going on in your industry that's really important that you want to share, particularly if you're in HR or health and safety or any professional services where there may be a change in the law or the guidance that you want people to know about. Here's holidays and special days. So at Christmas, wishing your clients a Merry Christmas. Informing them of your closing hours if that's something that has an impact. Invitations. So Mark, for example, will have emailed his database and said, hey, I'm doing a webinar on email marketing, come and join us. Articles and blogs. So anything that you've created and written, you've taken the time to develop that content, share it with every platform you have, put it on your social, you have it on your website, and send it out with your email marketing. And the same goes for any free resources, white papers, anything you're putting out there into the world that you want people to know about. This is another method to do that. So I will very briefly show you, because a lot of this is very conceptual until you see it. This is what MP7 looks like. This is a template. So this was created with what was known as a drag and drop editor. So you have all these elements down the left-hand side. You've got text, images, dividing lines, buttons, video, social shares, countdown, polls, links. There is so much that you can put to make your email look visually interesting without knowing anything about code. So literally, if I wanted to put a 1-column section or a 2-column section, I would drag this and drop it where I wanted in my template, and then that's it. And then you fill it from there. You move things in and you kind of edit them as you would a Word document. You know, you click and go, really. And I know that they put a lot of effort into making this a usable platform. And that's another reason why I recommend it to so many small business owners who aren't necessarily familiar with creating content digitally. This is exactly what you need to be able to do it without feeling intimidated. And down the right hand side, you'll see the style as well. So your color scheme and your font and any specifics that you have about your brand that you want to remain consistent, you can set all of that here. So when you pull in text from the left hand side, it's going to conform to your brand because you've already set a style. And you can set these templates once. So maybe you do 2 formats, you do one for a newsletter and one for an announcement. And then you can keep using them, and all you have to do is change the content. So if you've got a newsletter with 3 stories in it, you make a 3-story template, and then every month you go in, you swap the pictures, you swap the text, and you've got this month's template ready to go. It also does some really cool things. So if you use Vimeo to host videos instead of YouTube, you can embed your video in your email. Google Maps as well, if you're directing someone to an event, probably not at the moment, but if you've just moved offices and you want to tell people where it is, you can embed a map that is interactive as it would be if it was embedded in a website. You can do the same thing in the body of an email. So it's just a really brief flavor of what email marketing is capable of. And I mentioned earlier about sign-up forms. So I've got a couple of examples here. There are 2 ways of doing sign-up forms. You can embed them in a website, and whether you manage your website yourself or someone else can do this, you generate it in the email marketing software and then you just drop it in, as I have here. So this is 2 columns of my website, and I've put the form in the left-hand column. And you can see I've styled it so it fits in with the website itself. It isn't obvious that this form isn't part of my website, but everyone who signs up with that goes straight into my database in the email marketing, and I don't have to do anything. Alternatively, you can set up what's known as a landing page. So it's sort of like a standalone 1-page website, and that's hosted by the email marketing platform. They all do this, and you can design that how you like. So if you're not either you're not confident doing it on your own website, or maybe you don't have a website, or you're not, you know, it doesn't lend itself to adding a form, you can just build this independent page and direct people to it. So you put out a post on social media saying, hi, if you want to keep up to date with the latest news and updates from my business, here's the link, and then they can do so here as well. Apologies, Mark, I'm very conscious of time, but I am doing my best. So there's 3 ways of building your list in the first place. There is direct consent, so your current customers, and I will only touch on this briefly because I know Mark is going to talk about who you should and shouldn't send your emails to. Your current customers, you have your online lead generation, so that is your social media. And again, sending them to sign-up forms, that's what I mean by online lead generation. You've got your offline lead generation, so that would be meeting someone in person, them handing you a card, and you confirming that they're happy to be added to a list. And again, that would be Mark's territory for you. Indirect consent, so some people have website tracking where they can see who it is that's visiting their website, or social media engagement. So people who have liked and shared and commented, and conversations that you've had where people have not specifically told you that they want to be on your email marketing list in the way you would with a sign-up form. This is another way of gathering data. And then thirdly, third party. So by data mining, I mean when you go into LinkedIn, for example, and you put in the search bar HR managers, and you get a list of HR managers, and you can go into each of them and find their contact details. That's data mining. Purchase lists. So there are plenty of companies out there. If this is something you're interested in, I'm happy to recommend some. where you can say, look, I'm looking to target this job title in this geography with this type of company, and you can give them as much information as you can or you need, and they'll generate a list for you. And then thirdly, membership data. So if you are a member of the Dorset Chamber, for example, or another organisation like that, they may well send you a list of the members and their contact data. That would be a third-party method of gathering data. So you can see there's an awful lot of options available to you, and I certainly wouldn't recommend attempting to do them all. And if you are unsure about the implications of generating your data with any of these methods, then Mark is the one to tell you about it. I shall hand over to Mark.
Thanks, Sarah. Yes, that was an excellent segue into my session. So yeah, good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Mark Gracie. I run Mark Gracie GDPR, which pretty much says what it does on the tin. I support businesses with their GDPR compliance, and have been doing GDPR compliance since 2006 when it was first published. But my data protection credentials go back to the 1998 Data Protection Act, when I became a data protection manager and turned a business from no data protection compliance into fully compliant and managing that compliance. So what I wanted to talk about was really sort of following on from that last slide. It really was a good segue into sort of the compliance side, because I think what a lot of businesses and business owners worry about is that they're allowed to do what they want to do with their marketing, and this might put people off practicing what Sarah's just been setting out as a plan and a way forward for email marketing. And the key areas that worry people are the general data protection regulation, GDPR, and the privacy regulations, which are often forgotten about, but actually still exist and sit alongside GDPR. And when we think about marketing compliance, about what you can and can't do, on the one side, you have data protection. So GDPR applies to your marketing data, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But first, I'm going to talk about the Privacy and Electronic Communications Regulations of 2003, or PECA for short, which set out the rules around direct marketing and what you can and can't do when you do or don't need consent. So when it comes to marketing compliance, yes, you need to think about GDPR, because GDPR applies to that data, and certainly some of the things you might be doing with your marketing data are covered by data protection. But the rules about, particularly around consent and when you do or don't need consent, and they vary, will come down to the PECA rules. And just to throw it on in, I mentioned cookies. I'm not going to cover cookies because we haven't got enough time for that. But when people talk about the cookie law, it's this law that is the law that they actually mean. So amongst other things, as well as electronic marketing rules, the PECA rules also set out the rules for the use of cookies on websites. So the Privacy Electronic Communication Regulations, or the PECA rules, cover electronic marketing, which from a definitional point of view covers everything from email and phone to text, SMS marketing, and it shows its age a little by also including fax messaging, fax marketing. When it comes to email marketing, which is what we're going to be talking about this afternoon, I'm going to cover the different rules for the different type of people that you might be targeting. And the same rules apply for text marketing. So if you're sending SMS text for marketing purposes, and also if you're using messaging platforms. So if you're marketing to a WhatsApp group, or you're marketing to people through online chat in Twitter or in Facebook or in LinkedIn, then these rules actually apply to those mechanisms as well. So when I talk about email marketing, I'm covering those areas as well within that. So what you can and can't do when you do or don't need consent really comes down to who you're targeting and what kind of marketing that you're going to be sending. But in terms of the targeting, if you're dealing with private individuals or sole traders, so freelancers, sole traders, private citizens, then I'm afraid you need GDPR level of consent. And that means that, and we'll talk about GDPR in a bit, but that means that you need to follow the rules about what consent should look like before you can actually do the marketing. GDPR applies to that marketing data, and you must always, in fact, this will be a theme across all 4 columns, you always have to provide and honour opt-outs. So if somebody says they don't want you to carry on marketing to them, that's it. You can't carry on marketing to them unless they opt back in, and that's regardless of what kind of person they might be. If you're dealing with your customers, however, there's a slight, regardless of whether they're private individuals or sole traders or businesses, there's a thing in the privacy electronic communication regulations that talks about what's called soft opt-in, and you've possibly heard about this. And this is basically says that if provided you gave your customers or your potential customers during the sales process the opportunity to opt out of your marketing, then you can market to them about your similar products and do so until they object. And again, as I said, you have to provide opt-outs and honor opt-outs. So that's the unsubscribe, and the rule is that it should be as easy to unsubscribe as it was to subscribe in the first place. So there are slightly different rules for customers, but if you're not customers, you don't have any business relationship with them, and they're private individuals or sole traders, then I'm afraid you need GDPR level consent, and you've got to work out how you're going to get that consent in the first place. And in just in case you're thinking, I'll email them, ask them if they'll give me consent, I'm afraid that's considered marketing as well. So you'd be breaking the law if you tried that. Now, the thing that most people don't realize is that actually marketing to business contacts, so say an employee within a business that you're targeting, you don't need consent. So you can market to business contacts, provided they're not sole traders, because as we said, they're treated the same as private individuals. You don't actually need any level of consent. GDPR data rules still apply to that marketing data. So employees of a business have the same rights as a private citizen with regards to their personal data. And again, you have to provide and honour opt-outs. So that does mean, if you want to, you can go and scrape the email addresses of managing directors off of websites, off of LinkedIn or whatever, and market to them. And you don't need their permission in the first place to have done that. The downside is there's some GDPR rules that you have to apply, but probably the biggest downside is there's lots of people who think you can't do this anymore because GDPR stopped it, and so you may have to contend with people complaining that you don't have a right to do this anymore, and where do you get their data from and stuff like that, and that becomes more of a data protection angle, because asking where the data's come from, what you're going to be doing with it, is all what would normally be called a subject access request. So you can do it. The only caveat I would suggest is that you may find, depending on who you're reaching out to, that they may question that you shouldn't be doing this and you're breaking the law. But you can tell them confidently that you're not, and that you'll stop contacting them from there on in.
And actually, if I may, Mark, you shouldn't be contacting people who wouldn't be finding your products and services relevant anyway. Why would you?
Yeah.
So they may find it intrusive because they weren't expecting it, but at the end of the day, if it's completely irrelevant, why are they on your list in the first place? So I suppose making sure that whatever you're doing is relevant to your audience matters, whether you should be doing it or whether you have to do it.
Yes, and that would probably likely, sort of kick back on any or cut down on any more kickbacks that you might get from people wondering why you're contacting them. Yeah, absolutely. And the other good news is if you're contacting generic business address, so hello at, info at, sales at, accounts at, that kind of thing, that's not personal data, so GDPR doesn't apply to that, and you don't need consent to do that. But again, you need to honour and provide and honour opt-outs, and as I said, that was a common theme across all 4 areas. You have to provide an opt-out. As I said earlier, it has to be as easy to opt out as it was to opt in, and you have to honour those. So I have talked to people who have said, but it's really important that this person understands this product and service I'm offering. If they've opted out, that's their lookout, and unfortunately it's tough for you. You can't contact somebody from a marketing point of view if they have opted out of your marketing. And that means that you should consider how granular you can be in the opting out if you use multiple channels. So we're obviously talking about email marketing, but of course there are other multiple channels. So somebody can opt out of postal marketing maybe, but continue to receive email marketing, that kind of thing. And so you will need mechanisms for managing that.
So,
and sorry, go on, sir.
Sorry, Mark. Yeah. So if you're currently sat there thinking, how on earth do I add an opt-out? Reassuringly, MPZ Mail add it by default to the bottom of your email, and all marketing platforms do, because they know how important it is and they recognize their role in that responsibility. So by default, all the templates you create will have it at the bottom, and for some of them you can change it, but I would always leave whatever's been put there by the template, because they know what you should be putting. Sorry, Mark, Karen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in terms of the bigger picture, if you want to know a bit more about the wider connotations of the PECR rules with regards to other forms of marketing, there's a free marketing poster I've got for a download on my website. I put the link at the bottom of that slide, which you can download, and that kind of summarizes what the PECR rules are across the full suite of marketing channels. And for completeness, because the ITO include it as well, it includes traditional postal mail or snail mail, as some people call it. So those are the PECR rules. So you either need consent because of the type of people you're targeting. You might be able to rely on soft opt-in if they're customers. You don't need consent for business contacts. And if you're dealing with generic business email addresses, then GDPR doesn't even apply. But for private individuals, sole traders, customers, and business contacts, of course, all of their data in terms of how you may be using it is covered by data protection. So this slide is a very top level summary of essentially the key parts of GDPR and how they apply. So GDPR applies to all personal data, so that includes email addresses as well as names and an address. It applies to any individual that can be identified from the data. So like I said, an employee within a business, that data, if you can identify who that employee is personal data, and data protection applies. So this isn't just about individuals that you might have as customers, it's as well as your suppliers, your employees, and people you interact with in businesses. There's a set of rules called data protection principles which apply, and they basically say that all processing must be fair, lawful, and transparent. So the fairness, lawfulness, and transparency is all about making sure that it's lawful for you to do the processing in the first place. Hence, from an email marketing point of view, why we covered the PECR rules. And the transparency aspect is the bit about explaining how you're using data. So people shouldn't be surprised to find out that you've got their email address and you're going to be using it unless it's lawful for you to do it in that kind of situation. I'm not going to go through all of those in a bit more detail, but generally they set out the rules. So things like not retaining data longer than necessary, not asking for data you don't need, making sure all processing is done securely, and so forth. I've highlighted two lawful bases there because when it comes to email marketing, those are the two that probably count the most. So we've talked about consent in certain situations, and we've also talked about soft opt-in, and we've talked about business marketing. Soft opt-in and business marketing would be legitimate interest on the basis that the law allows you to do it. And you have no way of contacting these people otherwise than doing it that way. But of course, the key one that most people think about is consent. And the key thing about consent is you have to be upfront and clear about what it is that somebody is consenting to, so that they can understand how you're going to use their data, and then they can take an affirmative or positive action to give you that consent in the first place. And you have to keep a record of consent being given. And of course, if you're using platforms like Sarah was talking about, MailChimp, etc., then they will take care of that managing of that consent in terms of recording when somebody's signed up and or when you've added them when you've got permission to. So you need to think about, it's all very well saying you need consent, but actually the GDPR sets out very key things that you need to worry about in terms of making sure that your consent is GDPR compliant. All the data subjects have rights, and there's common ones that people know about, like the right to be informed, which is why we have privacy policies. So that's explaining what you'll do with data once you've got it and how you're going to keep it and so forth. The subject access right is the right to get access to your data when it's being processed by an organization. And this applies to email marketing data as well. So if the only piece of data that you have about an individual is fred.blogs@company.com, that's Fred Blogs personal data. Data protection applies, and Fred Blogs can say, I want you to tell me how you use my data and where it is and so forth. And that would be a subject access request. And then we've got accountability, which is a core key element of GDPR. It sets out your proof that you are GDPR compliant, and it covers a range of things from making sure that you understand the basics of data protection to training employees if you have employees, but it also includes other things as well which can apply. So when you're using an email marketing platform like MailChimp or MPZ Mail and things like that, then they will be considered a processor. And as a processor, you have an obligation to make sure they're GDPR compliant and that there's a contract, or often called a data processing agreement, in place between you and the processor. It's your obligation as the sort of the data controller or the owner of the data, but the processors often have these all packaged in within their terms of service or terms and conditions. But you have an obligation to do that. And the other thing to consider, and this is one of the things that sort of falls within the legality of data protection. So in the principles section, I've got there as it's not actually listed as a principle because it's a separate element, but I've also put plus rules on non-EU processing. And there are strict rules that you can't process data outside the European Economic Area unless there are appropriate safeguards in place. So if you're using MailChimp, for example, you're putting personal data into MailChimp, and MailChimp is storing that data and you're processing it through MailChimp in the US, which means that you have to make sure there's an appropriate safeguard. And so the GDPR sets out what those safeguards look like. And you've probably heard of Privacy Shield. That's just been recently invalidated, so you can't rely on Privacy Shield. And for the reasons that Privacy Shield is invalid, there's some concern at the moment that some entities in the US, you can't be trusting them with their data, even though they tell you to. And so there's some complications there about your data being processed outside the EU. So as Sarah said, choosing somebody like MPZ Mail, they're UK based, even better than that, they're Dorset based. If you're Dorset focused on what a sort of shop local, as it were, they will be potentially processing or should be processing data in the UK or even within the EU, and that takes away that extra risk assessment and balance that you have to put in place with regards to learning that your email marketing processor is actually processing your data from the States or a non-European Economic Area country. There's obviously a lot more to it, but one of the key things that you need to think about is that GDPR does apply to email marketing data, and so you'll need to have a full holistic understanding of what GDPR means. And unfortunately, we haven't got enough time to go through that in a lot of detail. So the thing is, that's not all. So sort of gazing into a crystal ball, there's some things that are on the horizon. Some of them have been on the horizon for quite some time that could impact some of the rules and regulations. So the Information Commissioner's Office, so that's the regulator that regulates both data protection law and the privacy regulations as well, publishes has to by law publish a direct marketing code of practice. And they've recently, back in March, I think it was, published a draft for consultation. The consultation is now finished, and we're waiting for that to come out in its final form. The process will be that because it's a statutory code, it will be needs to be passed through Parliament. Parliament might be slightly distracted by COVID and Brexit. So whether that happens this year or next year, it's not entirely clear. But the next steps will be the Information Commissioner will basically publish the code and say it is now being passed for parliamentary approval. Parliamentary approval happens, and then the code becomes an official code. Now, the reason why codes are important is because whilst they may not tell you, there may not be enforcement action for not following the code, it's difficult for you to demonstrate your compliance if you don't follow the principles of what the code is setting out. And certainly for statutory codes like this one, the ICO will use that against you if you're, if they say, well, our code says you should do this and you've not been doing it, then that will be hard for you to defend if they investigated. But for me, the key thing there is that obviously the privacy regulations haven't changed. The law is still the 2003 law based on a European directive. But the guidance has been updated to reflect some of the GDPR challenges with marketing data. So there's a lot of things in there, and you can download the draft now and see, because I don't think it's going to be too far away of what the final version will look like. But there's some stuff in there about what do you do if you're doing lead generation? What do you do if you're collecting data from third parties? Because if you're collecting data from a third party and they're doing the data list production for you, or a data broker or whatever, then you need to be sure that the data that you're using for your marketing meets the criteria of the consent mechanism. So did that person who subscribed to that broker's list know that they were going to be supplied to a company like yours, or preferably even your company, and so forth? And the code goes into that in the detail, and it also sets out a lot of things of like the right to be informed. How do you tell somebody that you've scraped all their data off of their website and off of LinkedIn because you're going to use it for marketing opportunities, and what are the details about what you need to tell them, and so forth. So look out for that code. It's certainly something worthwhile paying attention to, and when it is finally published, I'll probably run a webinar around it that sort of goes through the basics as well. I'm going to skip forward because I've got my links out of sync. I've put Brexit across all of this because obviously Brexit has an implication in general sense, not just for the economy, but also there are data protection implications as well. We are currently in a transition, so GDPR, as we've had it for the last 2 years, applies, but post Brexit, so from the 1st of January 2021, we will probably have something we'll be referring to as UK GDPR. So we'll be talking about EU GDPR and UK GDPR, which for all intents and purposes will be the same. We have a Data Protection Act 2018, which enhances some of the GDPR obligations as well. But there are other things in the pipeline. So one of the issues is that when we come out of Europe completely at the end of this transition period, we will be seen just like the US or India or China, in that we're not part of the European Economic Area. And you remember I was saying about the challenges around processing data outside the European Economic Area. So there's some challenges if you've got European customers with regards to processing data in the UK, and the government's published a national data strategy, which has worried the EU as well, which is looking likely to be another reason why the EU may not grant an adequacy decision, which is basically saying, well, you've had GDPR for the last 2.5, nearly 3 years, so we may as well assume that you are complying with the EU version. But the national data strategy, which kind of says data protection regulation is a bit too restrictive, and we want to introduce some, whilst maintaining controls, introduce some new ways in which we can all benefit from the increase in the use of data. And of course the EU is saying, hang on a minute, what does that actually mean in reality? So there's a number of reasons why we may have UK GDPR, but don't seem to be believed by the European Council and Parliament that we have a EU standard, even though that's what we're living by right now. So anyway, that's a whole webinar all on itself, that one. And then finally, this has been bubbling around for, well, since GDPR came in, we were supposed to also have got a new update to the e-privacy regulation, which is the bit that gives us the PECA rules. There were, that seems to be going to and fro within the Council and the Parliament, mainly led by whoever's the president country of Parliament, which of Europe, which changes every 6 months, and different priorities for different nations or member states means that sometimes the privacy regulation drops off the radar and then comes back again. Potentially, it could change the email marketing rules. So the rule of you don't need to get consent to market to businesses could be changed to be you do need consent to market to businesses, just like you do with consumers. That's certainly the case in some European countries like Germany, for example. It could just change the whole way that marketing rules change, and there's also probably be some introduction to cookie rules. But of course, Brexit is another variable, which means that, well, it's not likely, even if privacy regulation gets passed in Europe, it probably have a 1 or 2 year implementation period, and we'd be well and truly out of Europe by then. So that means, what does that mean in terms of the UK government implementing it? Will we get a UK version of the privacy regulation, or will we just have a UK version and we stick by that in terms of what the UK government or the ICO think we should be doing? So Brexit's got its, I was going to say grubby hands, but that depends on how you feel about Brexit. I guess it's got its hands on various different areas, and data protection is certainly not an exception to that. So that was all I was going to cover. We've just about reached time. There was no questions through the question section. Sarah very helpfully shared the link to the poster, but there is time. If I'm sure we can take a few questions if you would like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the share and stop the recording, and then if you want to ask questions, then we can. Otherwise, we'll leave it at that. And we're going to circulate a recording of the presentation part and also the slides that we've used, so that you've got those for reference as well.